Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I'm a forest gardener and a forest garden designer. And I am on site today, so which is very, very exciting. So I'm working on a job. There's an eco homes job. You can see people in the background. I'll try to keep their identity secret. And I am very busy, yeah, which is great. So it's a building. Today what I wanted to do was to talk about the design decisions that I've made, which is I've got the plans here, so I can show you the plans in a blurry inside a car sort of a way. And I wanted to talk about the plant choices and the kind of restrictions on the job, and also what you can do within those restraints, what you can actually do to create a wildlife and forest garden of sorts, on a limited budget and with a limited kind of brief, really. So there are 5 buildings, and two of them are the two buildings on the north of the site. They're eco homes, so they've been built with facing south, with big windows on the south, small windows on the north, and with photovoltaic solar panels, so creating electricity. And very interestingly, they have Tesla batteries, so they store the electricity. So the Tesla batteries, I think, are pretty expensive. They're a few £1,000s, but it's a good way of storing the electricity. And because they're built as kind of pretty much passive house standards, although they do have openable windows, this means that the heating bills are, someone was saying it was for their entire energy bill, and they weren't using a lot of implements or anything, but their whole energy bill, I think, was £30 a month, and that's for everything. That's for cooking, and that's for heating, and yeah, so it really is the way to go. Really, we ought to be having eco houses and passive house kind of standards for every new house that is built. This is kind of a central requirement. And then the other side of that is that the existing housing stock needs to be insulated. It's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. People can't afford to do it. There's massive inequality in the UK. People can't afford to do it. It's a job of the government. So sorry out there, all you neoliberal economic stand on your own 2 feet Tories out there, but it's true. It's the government's job. No, you can't afford it. We can't afford £10,000 to have a house properly insulated. Anyway, so that's the kind of the background. The brief is kind of interesting. There's fair-sized gardens back and front. I haven't got the meter square. How many meters are there? About 6 meters by about 10 meters. 6 meters by 10 meters. Some of them are smaller, some of them bigger. Slightly smaller front gardens as well. The client originally specified a single fruit tree and a climber and lawns. So what I've done, I've persuaded them. I've got a mixture. So some houses have got 2 fruit trees. The smaller houses, they've got smaller fruit trees, so I'm using an MM106 and a Quince A rootstock, which is about 4 meters high by 4 meters wide, so a kind of substantial tree. And the trick is to place them so they're not blocking out the light, but also they're some really beautiful trees. And then there's some M26 kind of size Gisela for the cherries, which is about 3 meters, 3 meters high and wide, I think, roughly, off the top of my head. So I've kind of chosen not just any old fruit trees as well. I have chosen the fruit trees. So there's pears, plums, yellow Pershore, I think, yellow egg Pershore, yellow Pershore, pears, plums, and apples, and the Asian pears as well, because they're more ornamental, and they're kind of fruit. Yeah, really, really. I think it's a beautiful trees. And I've done it so that they're in pollinating partners, but they start early season through to late season for the apples, and there will be a range of fruit. So the idea is that people can share the fruit across across the year. You don't just get a glut of apples and that's it, you can't use them. You share them with your neighbours because you've got more than you can handle, and then they share their produce with you. And it's apples and it's plums and pears, but and cherries, but that's a good start. And I think this really ties into the idea of community. You're actually in a specific geographical space, and you actually use the resources that you have. And as part of that process, I am building a very, very simple website, which is going to be just detailing what plants are there. So it will detail all the different species for the apple tree and the plum trees and the cherries, and it will say these are the species. And each house you will see which each house has which fruit tree. And I'm doing the same for the climbers as well. So there's a range of different climbers, but this way people can see what they've got and what they can share too. So it's a kind of good way. It's a good combination of bringing people together through a really simple website. So I have found that with the Forest Garden live stream, similar kind of thing. It was never really planned at all, but there's a large WhatsApp group evolved over from my course of the backyard forest. So the WhatsApp group has evolved from that, and then there's also another informal WhatsApp group as well, and it's great because it's kind of bringing together people. But I think what you can do the same thing with a website and with a group or WhatsApp group or Facebook group or whatever it is. You can bring people together, and it helps communicate and helps communication between different people basically. So that's kind of really, really exciting thing to do, to get people working together. And the reason why it really is exciting as well is because there's a possibility there's some more houses being developed. It's social housing over that way, and then it's going to be private housing this way, and then more houses being developed here. So there's a possibility for kind of opening up the what's being grown. And then there is there's an acre field where they're talking about growing an allotment and an orchard and a play area at the top, which would be brilliant, absolutely brilliant thing to have. So again, using a website and using some sort of social group to bring people together and to be able to share the produce. So that is pretty good. That's pretty exciting thing to bear in mind. So it's like a community. It's a community forest garden in the offing, in progress. And the other thing that it's good to do is to be able to put the information down so that people know what plants they have and how to look after them. Now, I'll come on to the wildlife bit in a second. So I've put in a variety of different climbers and a variety of there's some what I call incidental, so some UK native wildflowers as well, and they kind of need pruning and looking after in slightly different ways. So there's like a clematis and there's not a clematis, sorry. There's a honeysuckle, which will need some sort of control because these are 2 meter fences at the back. And then there's other stuff like there's Passiflora incarnata, maypops, which is a passion fruit, which is a North American passion fruit, and they all need caring for in slightly different ways. Oh, an everlasting pea, everlasting sweet pea. It's the native one. I can never pronounce it. Lathyrus sylvestris. So it's a narrow-leaved everlasting sweet pea. And that's kind of much more. That's kind of herbaceous. Herbaceous-y. Well, it will last over the winter a bit. Actually, we've had it. But these plants all need caring for in different ways. So if you have a website where you have the information down, then you know what you need to do to kind of maintain it. And to be honest, there's going to be an awful lot of weeding to do as well. So this is that's another really, really good advantage of having a website with the information on, and it's almost like a book. It's almost a resource with a whole load of information that you can have for people to reference and say, oh, this is the plant that we have. This is edible. This isn't edible. So the North American passion fruit, the maypops, they have edible fruit. So you get a nice hot summer and you will have edible passion fruit, which is incredible. And I've yeah, got a whole variety of different things. I'll tell you the other plants from memory. So I've got the native everlasting sweet pea. Which is kind of dotted about the place, and the kind of sunnier patches. It's a member of the pea family, obviously, so it needs a kind of full. You really want to have it in full sun. Really lovely flowers, and it will keep on blooming quite late. We've still got flowers on the ones at home, and then you have. There's a couple of ivies. I've gone for, it's heterohelix, so it's the native ivy, but it's a cultivar, or otherwise known as a nativar. And what the hell is it called? Oh my goodness me, I didn't bring my glasses. Oh, it's tiny, I can't read that. Sunny Rise or something. It's called something like something with the word sun in. So it's a yellowish one. I've got a couple of those. That's on the north border. They'll deal with the lack of sun much more easily. And then there is the oh crikey, what else? So I've got people around the place. The honeysuckle, so native honeysuckle, that's going in quite a few different places. And I really can't read tiny text, and I don't have my glasses with me. And there is a hop. I've got a hop in there as well, and then kind of dotting out and kind of breaking up the gardens a little bit, so that most of the sides will be covered in some sort of climber. And then each of the houses will have most of the houses have got a single fruit tree. So the houses on the south side will have a large fruit tree on the south, and then the houses on the north side will have a couple of different fruit trees. Some of them have a couple of fruit trees, smaller. Just seeing what fits really. And then the other kind of key feature is that for the hedges, I am using fruit bushes. So there are a couple of different, there's a few different species that I've got going on. There's honeyberry, which is a honeysuckle, Linicera caerula. And this was the front hedge. So it's about a metre. They'll grow to about a metre and a half, planted about half metre intervals. And it will be a fruit bearing hedge, which is pretty bloody good, which is really exciting. So honeyberry, blackcurrant, josterberry, chuckleberry, and then there is a Japanese quince, and there is an aronia berry. I can't read that. I really can't read it. It's too small. It's an aronia berry. Can't remember which one. So that's the other kind of key feature. So you've got fruit tree, climber, and then fruit bushes as hedges on the front. Now underneath each of the fruit trees, I am putting quite a large area of ground cover of wood chip mulch, because that's what I can get hold of. So it will be wood chip, and it will be this is interesting. Oh, there's stuff going on all over the place. So there will be a wood chip mulch around underneath each of the fruit trees. And this is really from an idea from Lynn, who's part of the Forest Garden WhatsApp group. So thank you, Lynn. She was saying really good way of starting out with the forest garden is just to expand an area of mulch underneath a tree. Normally you'd have like a metre diameter around the base of each tree. So if you're planting a fruit tree into grass, you'd normally have a metre mulch around it, and this is to stop the grass from competing with the fruit tree, competing for nutrients and competing for water. So a tree will can really do really badly if there's not enough to go around, and grass will compete with it. And Lynn said, well, expand this area of mulch. That's exactly what I've done. I've got a 4 metre high Asian pear, Kosui, I think it is, Kosui, and that is going to be, that's mulched with 4 metre diameter of wood chip mulch, and I'm putting in a dwarf comfrey underneath, underplanting it. So the dwarf comfrey will go down and provide nutrients for the pear tree, and it won't compete with the roots. So the roots of the pear tree are relatively shallow, whereas the comfrey is kind of big taproots going down, so there's kind of less competition between them. So it's that's the kind of really key feature. And then doing the same thing with all the hedges as well. So rather than having hedging on, like a bark mulch and then the grass will just creep in, what you want to do underneath a hedge, I'm planting it up with a ground cover, thick ground cover. So there's, all sorts of different things depending upon the situation. There is a green strawberry and a wild strawberry and ground ivy and other plants as well, which I can't read off of my little thing there, but it doesn't really matter. So it's some other interesting native plants too, which is a shame actually, because there's a lot of options. This is something I'd like to explore more, is looking at different options for ground cover plants. So rather than using like big kind of blocks of single species, actually mixing them up and having a mix of them. So I have not yellow archangel, yellow pimpernel. Yep, sorry, I haven't got the details here. So I'm kind of experimenting. There's an evergreen, I think it's called yellow pimpernel, and it's an evergreen creeping, likes damp places, and I'm mixing it up with ground ivy. And the idea is ground ivy dies back quite a lot in the winter, and then you've got a bit of an evergreen, and that'll balance it out. So it's finding those combinations, kind of polycultures of ground cover. So you had a bit of interest, but also you're maintaining that cover as well, because ground ivy can look a bit scrappy all by itself. Another one you can use is strawberry and ground ivy. So a ground cover strawberry, like a green strawberry, goes well with ground ivy because it provides a bit of evergreen. It provides a bit of green strawberries aren't totally evergreen, but they provide an extra bit of cover, and they do better in the brighter areas, and the ground ivy does better in the shadier areas, and you'll really notice a difference. And so they kind of find their own place, as it were, but there's a bit more balance and there's a bit more interest in it. So that's kind of really interesting way of thinking about plants, and this is something I really want to look at for kind of more kind of functional plants, less kind of productive plants like ground cover and windbreaks, is looking at different species and kind of combining different species. So that's the so those are that's the kind of general idea. Fruit tree, climbers, and then underneath, and also by the this comes on to the hedge. Underneath the hedging there's mulch and ground cover, but also by the fences I'm putting a thin strip of 60 centimeters wide wood chip, and then putting ground cover in there as well. And this is to provide so that there's a space for wildlife, there's a space for kind of creatures to move around the garden. And I'm putting in hedgehog highway, so a small, can't remember the details of the size of it, but there's a small gap that you put in at the bottom of each fence, that you put in a gap like that high and that high, and a hedgehog can get through there, and a cat and other wildlife can't. And then you put a sign above it. And I think this is a really interesting thing, rather like the website where you're saying these are the species that you have in the area that you live, and this is what the species are for which particular house. You also have you can also put signs up. Now this idea comes from a couple of different places, but Mary, what's her name? We Are the Ark, Mary Reynolds, I think it is, a reformed landscape designer, and she says, like, for a particular area where you're doing wildlife stuff, if you put a sign in saying this is an ark and explain what the ark does, then it makes it much more deliberative. It's something that is that you are deliberately doing. You're creating a wildlife space, and you can do exactly the same thing for other features as well. So with a hedgehog highway, there's these little plastic signs that you get which go over the hole in the fence, but it says, keep this way, this is hedgehog highway, keep it clear for the hedgehogs. And it's only a little thing, but it just really helps to put across the idea that this is a deliberate feature, look after it. Likewise, you can. I am going to put later on. I'm going to get some logs. I'm going to make a log pile. So wildlife features. You have a kind of checklist of things that you want. So habitat, compost heap. Oopsie. So pile of stone for lizards. For lizards that want to bask in the sunshine, and all sorts of you can make all sorts of different habitat for different creatures. But if you can put a sign in, I'm really considering getting a wood burning, like a soldering iron, and then you create a stencil and you can make there's a whole load of wood kicking around here because these are timber clad houses, but make a stencil with the signs on. So I will be saying wildlife log pile. For each house will have its own log pile, and it's a deliberate pile of logs for wildlife. And I'm going to be interested to see how many different wildlife features I can squeeze in. So hedges are good, hedgehog highway, pile of logs. I might try and get some big stones in each garden, have like a little rockery area, that kind of thing. Just something something to provide different habitat. And we've got climbers, and then there's kind of fruit trees, and lots of ground cover plants and for pollinators. So that's a really really nice thing. And then so that's good. Making signs. I'm making work for myself really, because it'd be a lot easier just to have it all as lawn. I have actually, it's more complicated putting down. That's not more complicated really, but putting down mulch and putting down ground cover. It works out a bit more expensive, but you just get so much more. And hopefully what will happen is that people will see the space, and I am putting in just things like foxgloves and feverfew, and kind of I don't know, just incidental stuff like that. I've got some sedum that I've got spare, and kind of native plants that I have kicking around the place. Some red campion I've potted up as well, and dotting them around, put them together in groups where you think they might work. But it then starts to create a garden. And I think if you have an area of kind of ground cover, then people can realise that they can put in their own plants. It opens it up. So a similar thing is when Banksy, I've mentioned this before actually, but it's one of my favourite pieces of graffiti that Banksy's ever done. There was a big white immaculate wall in Kensington, and Banksy had put in a stencil sign saying, "This is a government authorised graffiti zone, feel free to put graffiti down." And then it was covered within 24 hours. People had permission to use it, and it was absolutely covered in graffiti. So I think the same kind of thing, by labelling clearly what things are and what they do, and saying put in some more plants here, do use this bed to plant up some ornamentals, and here's some ideas, and to allow people to engage with the garden. And by providing a ground cover, what you're doing is you're keeping the grass out so people can plant straight in, but they can plant straight in. You've got 4-meter diameter with comfrey in it, but you can put anything above 30 centimeters that will go in, really like a more statuesque plant, but that can go straight in. So it's kind of giving people options, giving people the permission to do it, and signposting it as well. So with a website, with the signposts, it will hopefully kind of draw people in. So, that's really exciting. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was I'm doing pretty well actually. The next thing is the entrance. So I could possibly switch over. There's people. Probably not. So the entrance to the development, there is an area of about, I'm not very good with a 22. Hold on, sorry, 30. 40, 50, is that 50 meters? I guess it might be 40, 50. They said about 40 meters. Anyway, it's about 40 meters. I think it's about 40 meters. There's an entrance bit, and I've got room for 4 trees. So there's going to be 4 trees which come in. I just want to talk about these because they're really, really, these are the statement trees that you have when you come in, but they're kind of, they're great trees as well, and they're forest garden trees. Now, and I've always wanted them for myself. So the first one that you have when you come in is a crabapple, a sentinel on an MM106 rootstock, and these have red apples, and they're beautiful blossom as well. And the apples stay on the tree for a long time. They're kind of over the winter, and they provide food. They're a food source as well for wildlife and early blossom. So they're fantastic, really, really ornamental tree, very beautiful and very practical. So that you can use the does anyone actually eat crabapple jelly? But you can use the crab apples to make jelly. So it's great, lovely plant, really fantastic plant, and very kind of ornamental. The next one is Sorbus Tibetica, which is a Tibetan white beam, and the cultivar is John Mitchell, I think, and a really lovely. I've always wanted one actually. I haven't got the dimensions down here. It looks about 4 meters. Looks about the same kind of. I think it's about 8 meters high. Yeah, I think 8 meters by 4 meters, something like that. Beautiful leaves, springtime. It has really, really beautiful silvery leaves, just absolutely stunning. And I think the flowers are scented, little clusters of white flowers and edible fruit as well, which is just brilliant. And it's just like a really pretty kind of dome tree. So I'd rather that was at my house, but there we go. It's going to do a lovely job here. And then Cornus Cusa, I've gone for. There's an ornamental variety called Milky Way, so a profusion of flowers. It's actually bracts, the leaf behind the flower, and they look like flowers in some plants, and they're kind of big star-shaped, creamy white star-shape, and absolutely loads and loads of them as well. Grows about 10 meters, 9-10 meters, I think. High, and then behind that is a prunifolia, hawthorn prunifolia, Crataegus persimilis prunifolia, also known as a broad-leaved cockspur thorn. North American. It's a hawthorn, really stunning, and very with edible, beautiful flowers in the spring, and edible berries, kind of appley fruit. So the haws are much bigger than the native Crataegus monogyna. So that's lovely. So there's 4 trees, and each of them have a different kind of. There will be a different season, and they're doing different things at different times of the year. So they're just going to be out. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely lovely kind of. Lovely entrance as you come in, and then I'm underplanting it. I actually can't remember what I'm underplanting. Periwinkle at one end, and then some field mint, Mentha arvensis, and some oregano at the front in the full sun. So there will be like a range. So oregano, mint, periwinkle where it gets a bit shadier, and then ground ivy around the corner, I think is what I'm going for. So there will be like flowers, oregano with the bees, and mint kind of comes up later than flowers later than the oregano, I think. Yeah. And then periwinkle flowers earlier on in the year, and ground ivy flowers early. So it's all some really, really good flowers for pollinators and cover as well. And then I've got incidentals. I will be putting in foxgloves and plants like that. I've got a few, not masses. I've got a few. So hopefully I can come back and do some maintenance and then add some more plants in as well. So that's the kind of setup, and this is like the kind of some ideas of what you can do. So you're encouraging wildlife, even within quite a strict brief. You're encouraging wildlife, and you are growing some fruit, and it's kind of forest garden-ish principles, but there's some lawn involved. Right then, let's have a look, see if I've got chat here. So hey, so sorry, there's some questions. So Dan's asked, are you putting in Mashua as a climate in any of them? I wasn't going to, but that's actually a good idea. So I was thinking, funnily enough, about putting in nasturtium. So similar kind of thing as a Mashua, but they don't. Mashua is a close relative of the nasturtium, but the nasturtium doesn't have edible. Well, probably does have edible roots, but Mashua has bigger, chunkier edible roots, which reminds me I need to dig mine up. And they kind of sprawl and they will climb, so it's actually quite a good. It's a kind of possibly a really good situation to put some. I might try some out in certain situations and see how they get on. So yeah, thanks for the tip, Dan. And Pam's asked, how many gardens are you reforesting? So I will be reforesting. Crikey, I think it's about. Well, there's 5 buildings. There's 10 dwellings. That's 20 front and back, so it's 20 gardens in total, plus the strip on the side. That's 21 gardens, and here I am chatting on the live stream. There we go. Anyway, so hope that's interesting, everybody. Yeah, it's a bit whatchamacallit, made up as I go along. But that gives you an idea of what I'm actually up to, and I kind of would rather keep the live stream going as well. I mean, there's an awful lot of work to do. I have just found out I've been under-delivered the wood chip is 1/5 the amount that I need, but 100% the price that I've paid for it. So that's going to be a little awkward conversation coming up later. But there we go. Anyway, the joys of contracting. But it's really, really exciting. It's just amazing to be able to see a situation where you can change people's lives and add something to people's lives. There'll be hold on, how many families? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 families. 16 families will be affected by what I'm doing now, directly affected, plus some more families as well. So it's going to be, I don't know, 20 families in total eventually. So that's a lot. That's great, fantastic to be able to do work that positively affects that many people. Okay, I'm going to swap over to Zoom now. Thank you all very much for watching, if you have indeed been watching.